is Bad Marriages in the Bible, and we are your hosts. I'm Sean.
I'm Kate.
And we are married, and we run Dandelion Ministries, where we create space for you to experience the grace of Jesus Christ, where you really need it, where you're really hurting, where you're really afraid, where you're really doubtful of love and forgiveness in your life, and where you've really blown it. So you need to hear God's grace there and know it and experience it. And we love to do that through art and music, through creative means, because it gets around our defenses. We are so good at building up a defense against actually having to feel the pain and the need and all of that stuff, because so much of life and the world is telling us all the time that you shouldn't feel those things, that you should be happy all the time. Happy, smiling people holding hands, to quote REM, and which I was never a huge fan of REM, just for the record. My friend Chad, huge fan of REM, and I love him for it, but I was into Led Zeppelin, so there we are. And but we want you to know that. We want you to experience His grace where you actually need it. And so we are walking through the Bible and looking at the primary relationships, marriage specifically, because it's in our primary relationships, the ones we're most intimate with others in, where we experience our need the most, where we experience our sin the most, because sin is essentially just us not being able to love the way that we should and need. We're not able to give it, and we're not able even to receive it right. We have a very broken love situation. So we are walking through the scriptures, and we're looking at these relationships that God has recorded for us to see that these people are just like you and me, just a bunch of regular people who are struggling with their brokenness, who are desperate for grace and love, and they're looking for it in all the wrong places, and they need Jesus. So that is the gist of the show. And we've made our way up to Proverbs, and we are looking at chapters 6 through 8 today. But yeah, that's my little intro. I don't know, Kay, if you want to add something to that.
That's exactly what Proverbs 6 is about, Sean. What a great segue.
There you go.
Looking for love in all the wrong places.
Yes, that's right.
And so Proverbs 6 through 8 really leans hard on the idea of adultery. And it's personified as sort of the woman of adultery and the woman of...
Foreign woman.
Yes, the woman of wisdom. But that's really personified. It's just more the idea of adultery. But it is ascribed a she. And also, so as is wisdom.
Yeah, and as we've talked, I think, a lot before, the Bible's written in a certain context, and it's attributed to Solomon. So we're hearing this essentially from his mouth, talking to his son, and we know that Solomon struggled heavily with adultery.
Right.
And
although it's almost impossible for him to have committed it, because he just was a polygamist, so he just
kept marrying people all the time. So it was like a little loophole, except for the fact that he had a ton of concubines too. So, but the point being is that it's this is written from a male perspective in the immediate, but it applies across the board, because sin is sin, and we all are broken and lustful and have adulterous hearts. And but it's one of the things, the idea of the adulterer, the adulteress, the temptation and all of that is such a just in your face, I think, example of being pulled away from what is right and true and good into something else, right? And so that your heart is actually deeply attracted to the forbidden fruit, as it were, So I think it's encapsulating all of our waywardness in our hearts, but it's personified in a woman.
That's right. But as is wisdom. So
sure.
So there's always a counterbalance in Scripture about that. And as another sort of disclaimer, the passages like these have been used to, sort of promote sort of a modesty culture in
Mm.
Christianity, in conservative Christian circles. I actually didn't really experience much of this kind of talk, but it is.
Because you were from the wild land of Canada.
Yes.
That's where you spent your teenage years. Just
Well,
a crazy, wild place.
I would say my parents were very wise about talking. They actually never had the sex talk with me. I was a middle child, so my oldest and
picked
youngest
it up by osmosis. So many of us got that,
they forgot, but
it'll be fine.
yeah. I went to a school that was very a girls' school. It was very progressive, so I learned everything I needed to know there. But there is a strain of it where the onus is on girls and women to dress modestly because they will cause men to stumble into adultery, and that is. I'm a fan of dressing modestly. We have 2 daughters, and when they consider shirts, Sean always says, well, if you're comfortable with me also wearing that length of shirt,
in public, then you can wear it too.
That's right.
I think that's a fair bargain. If you're going to wear that on public, then I'm going to wear that on public. And we'll all deal with it together.
And so we're all into, enjoying fashion and wanting to look good. And that is all a wonderful thing. But there's a way to do it. And even to celebrate your body that isn't immodest.
Yeah, well, that's the two-edged sword there, right? I mean, this is the way, like, so much of the conservative Islamic world is built on this.
Yes.
And it is because it's from a patriarchal point of view, and it's like the man clearly is the one that is given preferential treatment and is the one that you should be more concerned about him than everybody else anyway. And so clearly if you're causing him to stumble, like, it's your fault.
It's your fault.
It can't be his.
Right. And so, the eyelashes that are mentioned in here and, her dress. So that has been, I would say, erroneously put the responsibility on women to prevent that from happening.
Right.
But that's not what the scripture says here. The scripture is addressed to the men so that they would take responsibility for where their eyes are going.
Right. And yes. And just before I move on from the point, since we are parents of girls, I'm a girl dad, as they call them. And, we don't teach them modesty or anything like that out of some sort of responsibility to others. It's out of respect for themselves.
It's out of their own self-worth.
Yeah, it's
That's
like,
right.
well, you don't need to throw yourself around like that. You don't need to try to attract men to get value.
That's right.
Or to attract just the gaze of anyone, which so much of it nowadays is the gaze of your peer. You're actually other girlfriends. Like, I want you to think I look great. And, and we want our girls to know that they are valued because of who they are and not because, we would appreciate their looks. They are attractive girls, but we want them to dress in a way that honors them and it conveys that message that they believe, that they have in themselves, that I have value. And if you're going to be interested in me, you better value me too. Right? So I say that as the father. It's like,
that's right.
It's something T.D. Jakes, the, pastor, famous author, pastor guy, who once said, he was preaching to the men, if you aren't telling your daughters that you love them, then they're going to run into the arms of the first guy that does.
That's right.
And it's not going to matter if he really means it or not. So like the idea of instilling value and telling your children, especially your daughters, how beautiful they are to you and how valuable they are to you is the true version of, I would say, of modesty, as opposed to this counterfeit thing you're saying, like which is just a restrictive, shame-based version.
Frankly. Absolutely. And this building into your child's self-worth happens from day one. And so you have been very open about your affection for them and how you think they're beautiful, inside and out. You don't need makeup. I do wear makeup and I do like fashion, but
But you don't
I
need
don't
it.
have to have it. And I'm very clear to say that too. You
Yeah.
don't have to have it.
You look beautiful with it. You look beautiful without
I
it.
do, because it's fun. That's why we do it. It's because it's fun. So from day one, building that in, if you have lacked that emotional connection, and then you zoom in during their teenage years with rules or restrictions or a sense of disappointment in the way they look, they will rebel against that because you don't have the cred with them. You don't have that long past of being for them and of being that source of loving affection that does not withdraw, that is present when they do good things and when they do bad things in the forgiveness.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's the same is true for sons. I was a son and am a son, and it's the same thing. Which is what you're building towards. Solomon is trying to speak truth and wisdom to his son, and counseling him and warning him off of running into just kind of the eye candy of the adulterous woman, and she's saying all the right things. It's like basically a huge booby traps for this guy. Sorry for the pun, I didn't mean it, but it's there anyway. And and but the whole thing with your son is this, you need to be instilling the same thing. It's like, you are valuable, and you want to be treated with respect and everything like that, and so you also should be treating everyone else that way, and modeling that with your spouse. If you're a father, really loving and valuing and respecting your wife, and sending the same messages, because it's the same kind of, we like to dismiss it and say boys will be boys kind of thing in our culture, and give them a pass, which reinforces that, it's all the girl's fault. It's all on them, which is garbage. It's not true at all. I mean, you can say whatever you want about sex drive and all that stuff. Like, we've all got it when we're teenagers. And the reality is that your sons need to be raised up in a way that actually is open and talking about this as well, talking about their sex drive, giving them, like, helping them to understand the safe boundaries for it and for them. And that, that it actually is their responsibility in how they manage themselves and how they treat women and how they engage with the opposite sex. So, my parents did not have a very strong presence on that front with sexual conversations. I didn't know how to talk about it, didn't know how to process any of that. And so my understanding of sex was a very mishmash thing. I was scared half the time, but also desperate for that kind of connection. And, and it was just all very confused. I needed more help and guidance there.
Absolutely. And that is the number one need, is that connection for a child to have with their parent, where you're a safe place. They can talk with you about anything.
Yeah.
And the Bible, if you read the Bible, it will make you talk about sex over and over again.
It's like, geez, come on. It knows us. That's the whole point, is we're getting at, is like, God is like, hey, I know. Like, you guys are all walking around and you can't handle yourself. You can't control your urges.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Right. And so there's grace abounds for this. He's not thrown off by this. And he is instigating these uncomfortable conversations right here with Proverbs, because he knows that we're all struggling with it. We're all hearing temptation call our name. And that, I think, if you're going to sit under this passage in Proverbs 6, temptation is calling your name. It's directed right now at the men.
The son.
But a woman can appropriate this for herself too. So he's pleading, and again, Solomon is a man full of regret who did not live this out, but is now pleading with his son that this is the better way that I didn't do, but this is what is really good. And I can tell you from experience, from somebody who's done everything with everybody, you know?
Right. Yeah. It's like, hey, I've been down that path, and we all have that, the joke, it's like, I've been told money isn't everything, but I'd like to learn it for myself. That's what we do we all think we know better when we're young and when we're teens and we're going through adolescence and kind of going through all this. We think we know better than our parents. And, but this is Solomon is saying, like, I've actually, like you just said, kind of quoting Freddie Mercury from, that I've done everything with everybody. And I'll tell you, and that's where we get Ecclesiastes, all of that. He's just saying, like, this is vanity.
Yeah.
That it actually does not fill the need. And that's what we're going to get. We're going to get into the fact there is legitimate need.
There's legitimate need.
And
absolutely.
It's important to acknowledge that with your kids.
Absolutely.
And yourself.
So his first warning in Proverbs 6 to his son is, if you go into another man's wife, her husband is going to come after you. It's very practical.
Just very, as we would say, kind of first use of the law order kind of thing. It's like, if you try to grab that rattlesnake, it's going to bite you. If you have sex with another man's wife, he's not going to be okay with it.
Yes.
That's what it says. He's going to come find and try to kill you.
Right. Exactly. So it's very practical. Our kids are going through the DARE programs with the police, and they're talking about drugs and alcohol, and you should add cannabis now to that list, because all of that is available at your fingertips here. Right. And you are under the influence. You're not in your right mind, when you are driving a car. And this is what happens. And we're going to look at pictures, and we're going to talk about that. Whatever your opinions are of the having, marijuana as legalized.
She's referring to an article with Elton John. If you guys, he was on the cover of Time recently, and Elton John famously has been in recovery for a long time, and he'll talk to you. He talks very frankly in the article about how he thinks it's the worst thing that's ever happened, the legalization of marijuana, because he's like, I've been high,
I've been stoned.
Yeah, he's like, I've been stoned a lot in my life, and I know that marijuana is a gateway thing. It's a gateway drug. And it's not this benign substance. So this is an aside. We're obviously off on marijuana legalization, but take it from Elton John. It's not a good thing, and it actually is. It does cause addiction, and anything does. This is the reality. The whole idea of any substance, be like, well, it's not habit forming. It's like, tell that to your brain, tell that to your own heart that is desperate for something to numb out with. This is the point that Proverbs is getting us to, is that we've got a broken heart that is full of need and desperate for comfort. And we will turn to the thing that gives it to us fastest and, in what we think is the most complete way. But it always ends up biting you in the butt. Like, that's the thing that Solomon's getting at. Like, this is actually going to backfire.
That's right.
It's not the real thing to fill that need.
So we've already appropriated this idea of adultery in particular with the greater idea of temptation calling your name. But the first thing it does is say there's no consequences.
That's always the lie of temptation.
Right. Whereas Solomon is saying there will be consequences. Yeah. Either the husband is going to come after you, or, as we said, you might have a car wreck. So we have appropriated adultery, but we're going to return to the actual idea of adultery too.
Yeah, and it's important just to remember that is the nature of temptation every time. It's the nature of Satan's attempts on you. However you want to, you might. It's just the beginning. It's what we talked about in Genesis. The promise. It's this empty promise that's saying, it's not going to hurt you. You're not going to die. It's going to be fine. And that is always the nature. Like, no one has to know. It's going to be cool.
That's exactly.
And like, this is temptation, everybody. And when anybody says that to you, it should be red flag. Like, everybody's going to find out.
That's right.
Like this is what happens.
And that's exactly where Solomon goes in Proverbs 7.
Mm-hmm.
So he's, again, pleading with his son, please listen to what I have to say. What I am saying to you is wisdom. Treat it like your sister, like something really valuable that you want to hold on to and you don't want to lose. He loved his siblings. I hope you do too. Maybe not everybody would feel this way.
Think of Madagascar. For those of you out there, the Madagascar, the little penguins, when he's like, just a peck, just like you're kissing your sister.
That's
anyway.
right. That's right. Yep.
Go watch it if you haven't seen it.
So he's saying, I have seen young men do this. I've been at my window, looking out of the lattice of my window, and I've seen young men at the end of the day in twilight where they're done with work and they're not quite going home yet, and they're vulnerable, and they have all these impulses.
To the bars or whatever.
Yes, they have all these impulses, and I've seen them get pulled. They want to be wanted. And out there is the call of temptation, the foreign woman, the strange woman, that call of temptation.
Yeah.
And she is eagerly seeking you. Verse 15. She is trying to get to you. And she is saying that there are no bad consequences. Verse 19. My husband's away. He'll never know. And she even has the guise of good intentions. Oh, I was, out making sacrifices to God, and I just need a little help. She goes
to church,
and she's a Christian.
It's true. This is like he's pouring it on thick here. He's like, this is as bad. It can be this bad, and it sounds so great, and it's like it's just gonna not go well.
Exactly, and she is playing on that need that we all have for enjoyment and pleasure, and she's saying we're going to indulge ourselves all night long.
Yeah, and ironically, the legitimacy on some level is just like, oh, I've been doing all these good things for the Lord, It's like it is completely cloaked in, falsehood, where it's just like this is what, it's telling you all the things you want to hear, and it's not actually true. And it makes me think of the Oh Hellos, which is another Christian band for you guys that don't know them, but it's not like saccharine Christian music. It's actually quite good. So anyway, they sing a song called Eat You Alive, which I love. And but that he said to me, child, I'm afraid for your soul. These things that you're after, they can't be controlled. This beast that you're after will eat you alive and spit out your bones. She'll string you along and she'll sell you a lie. There's nothing but pain on the edge of a knife, and there's no courage in flirting with fear to prove you're alive. I've seen the true face of the things you call life, the song of the siren that holds your desire. Death, she is cunning and clever as hell, and she'll eat you alive.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a good song. Oh my gosh. And it's got a great driving beat. So go listen to Eat You Alive by the Oh Hellos. And, but it captivates, it captures the whole thing of just that this is so, there's a real power in it. I want to say that, when we're talking about temptation, because so often we're being tempted in a place of real need and a place of real hurt very often. That's why it's so powerful. Like if you're feeling very solid as a human, like we were talking about our daughters earlier, if they're feeling very secure and connected and attached to the people that truly love them, then if some guy comes along and is whispering sweet nothings to them and everything like that, they're going to be able to identify it faster. And they're going to be able to be like, they're going to call BS, and they're going to be like, really, guy? They're going to make him, they're basically going to be more discerning. And so often the areas where we feel the strongest temptation are areas where we have real weakness, where there's a real lack from our past, and possibly a real whack. These are the different kinds of abuse that you suffer as a child. The whacks are the very overt ones where you've been hit or you've been, verbally abused or sexually abused. And the lacks are when there's been a void in a place where you've actually needed love. And it's just been lack after lack after lack. And it builds up to have the same impact as if you were really physically abused.
It does.
And we have to do, for ministry, we have to do trainings regularly. Every 2 years, we have to re-up our, what they call ministry safe training. And it's sex abuse prevention training. And I just had to redo that recently. And that's one of the stats they give. This is kind of like the book has talked about prostitutes a lot and adulteresses and all this. And this statistically, they were saying that 98% of people that find themselves in prostitution, male and female, have suffered sexual abuse when they were kids. 98%. So, that's the subtext of this passage, is that this woman is actually very wounded too.
Yes.
And she's pulling you into her own brokenness and the brokenness of her own marriage. And it's going to eat you alive, as the Oh Hello said. And so there's a view of compassion that, Proverbs doesn't get very explicit about it, because Solomon's just trying to warn his son. He's trying to keep him from going there. But the scripture's not naive about where this woman has been. It's the woman caught in adultery with Jesus in scripture, not that she was caught in adultery with Jesus, but it was Jesus who ministered to her when she was brought before him, and everybody is accusing her and wanting to condemn her and stone her. And he famously says, he who's without sin may cast the first stone. And it's getting to the heart reality that Proverbs is exposing, 6 and 7. And so I just want to acknowledge that, because that is the truth. We get pulled in these places, and it feels so powerful at times, because there is such a deep need that we don't even fully get the gravity of, or we don't even understand the depths of it very often in our lives.
Absolutely. It is. So I guess the unmet needs, that would be the subtext of getting pulled in this way, is where you are feeling really wanted. You know, that somebody's really wanting you. And if you're having a lack of that, whether it's from your own spouse is not giving that kind of affection or attention to you, or you're carrying it as a wound of not being seen or loved, from childhood. So really being wanted, that is the unmet need that's being met there. I mean, that's how you recruit, child soldiers into horrible, warrior
warfare,
tribes. Exactly.
sure.
And, terrorist groups, is that you get to be involved in a part of a club, and you're important to this person, and that you matter. Everything, that you are matters to them, and that's what pulls you in. But then it actually produces captivity to that, and it won't let you go, and it's going to lead to death.
Right.
And so that wanting to be wanted, and also the need for comfort and satisfaction.
It's a legitimate need. We've talked about it on this podcast, through Song of Solomon and all of that, is that we're physical beings, and we're created for intimacy.
That's right. How do you soothe yourself? How were you soothed growing up? Where was soothing? Was it with food? Was it in front of a screen? Was it in the arms of somebody who would hold you when you were crying? How were you soothed? What were those options like? Because life is full of opportunities where you need to be comforted and soothed
all the time.
And so we're constantly drawing on our soothing skills, our comforting skills.
Yeah, or lack thereof.
Exactly. Or lack thereof. And so if there is something that promises something quick and immediate and so powerful, like it's going to give you that dopamine so fast, and so much of it, more than a cup of tea and a blanket, but
it wouldn't be as tempting if she was like, come have a cup of tea. I'd be like, I'm good.
Right. So, but again, it's going to get you captive, and it's going to isolate you, and it's going to draw you away from the people that you need and love. And
it's going to also be just one, addition is it's going to be characterized by secrecy. Right?
Yes.
It's going to be characterized by not more community, but less, and kind of hiding and fear.
That's right. So there you go. So Proverbs 6 and 7, they are going to lead you to need desperately Proverbs 8, which is because they are the words of demands. My son, listen to me. Don't do this. Don't turn there. Don't do that. Do this. And all of those things, as you read this book, they are going to hit you in a certain way. Either they're going to convict you of a place where you might be going in secret. And particularly as you walk through Proverbs 6 and 7, it's marking the different places you go in the day, at the gateway, at the byways, at the door of your house. It's kind of listing all these different places where someone might go throughout the day and even times of day.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might get convicted about some place that you're going to get soothed, where you feel wanted, that is marked by a sense of shame afterwards, of not wanting people to know about it, and is not coming from faith, but is coming from trying to get, a need met in secret. And so you might read this and feel convicted. We all have. That is by design.
That's exactly it. I mean, the book is doing this because, like we said, God knows, and this is where we're living. This is where we're living. And like all of us have our areas of real need, and we all understand the temptation that it's describing.
That's right. He's not going to leave you there, but it might do that, if that's something that needs to be uncovered. I remember, I wasn't particularly reading this, but
Sure.
but I became aware of a time of temptation for me when I would drop the kids off at their preschool. It was a private preschool, and all these parents were all lined up, and they were all getting ready for work, and the women particularly looked nice. And so my straying eye tends to compare my body to other women's bodies. And so that was like a minefield for me when I would drop them off, and maybe I was in my pajamas.
Right.
And so maybe I wasn't quite as dressed as I might like to be, but I became aware of that, and that I was feeling shame afterwards, and I would sort of chew on those, compare myself throughout the day to some of those women. And I also didn't want my kids to do that kind of behavior. So it's not like I'm like, hey, this is a great idea to do before you go to school. Like I wasn't actively thinking I'm trying to keep this a secret, but it just was happening in my mind. It's not something I was particularly proud to tell Sean about or anything. And so he's talking about an area of lusting over a married woman, but for, that's still envy of the eyes,
Sure.
It's still something that Romans 7, Paul talks about. Envy is being
covetousness,
covetousness, coveting somebody else's body. And so for me, that was one of the areas of conviction. And so thank goodness I have the gospel and I have Jesus, that in the one moment where you become aware of that kind of pattern, he is already ahead of you with his forgiveness and grace. And it was actually his love for me that brought that out into the open, that he has a better way for me. And that is exactly what Proverbs 8 is saying, that the God of all creation, in his wisdom, created all of the heavens and the earth, and particularly the children of men. And the wisdom was delighting in the children of men when they were being made. And so it was God and his delight and in his love for you that brings these things out. And if you read Proverbs 8, it actually closely parallels Isaiah 11, which is describing what kind of fruit, what kind of goodness that the Messiah would bring, God's chosen one. And he would be the one through whom wisdom and insight comes. And the chapter goes in verse 18 to how he will lead his people out of slavery. So that is always what Jesus is doing, is uncovering an area where you might be caught in a sense of slavery, and he's bringing you out into his forgiveness, into his grace, and into a better way of love that's going to satisfy those needs, and you'll feel good about it afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, I have a similar thing with the gym. Going to the gym was always really challenging, difficult, because people are dressed to attract each other at the gym. I don't know if you've been to one lately, but that's just what it is. You want to improve your body, look good, and everything like that. And those who are already kind of on that track and look pretty good want to show it off. And so that was a challenging thing for me. It was very distracting. And you could, like the book we talked about earlier, it could be like, oh, these women should just dress more modestly at the gym. It's like, well, we're exercising. It's not their fault, but it's like, not to say that there are some outfits that were just very unhelpful. I'll just say that.
There certainly were. They would go to Starbucks afterwards.
Basically
and I would be
wearing like a thong.
She's naked. Okay.
And, but still, like, so that idea, this is, like Kate's saying, like, these are areas where we will feel the conviction, and we have a God who's saying, I know, and I understand this, and I am bringing this out so that you can actually see it, face it, feel it, and get to the real thing beneath it. Get to the real need beneath it, which is you do want to be loved. You want to be seen and desired. That's the thing. If you go to the gym, everybody's sitting there like, I'm just desperate for somebody to look at me. I want somebody to like think I look great. And there you go. I mean, that's the need we're all sitting there dying for, and like we're all trying to get it in illegitimate ways. And so that's, we want the love and connection and affirmation on a deep heart level that really only the Lord can give us, and give us that sense of peace, so that we're not actually pulled in by these things. So anyway, in Romans 8, excuse me, Romans 8 is a great chapter, so, but we're not talking about that.
Go read it.
Proverbs 8 is him acknowledging that he's declaring the value,
your value,
yeah, as he's describing it. It's in verse 22 and following, and where are we? Yeah, and he's talking about how beautiful we are and how much he delights in us and all of this, and it's just we need to hear it every day. That's the other thing, is like, this is not, I think we've talked about this before, but you never hear I love you enough, and that's why we need the Bible written down, and we need to hear this. And even Solomon's act in telling his son is him saying, like, I love you. I don't want you to go down these paths. But he's also acknowledging where the true joys are to be found, as the prayer book says, that this is actually something that only the Lord can really give. And I want you to know how valuable you are. So, yeah.
That is, and so the attachment that we crave, and that even the best of parents can't perfectly give this attachment to their kids, but the attachment that we crave, God is saying, I have fully attached to you. I have fully seen you. And even before you were born, I've made everything around you, and I've delighted in you. I love you. I am here for you. And I've given you my son to be for you. And he's the voice in your mind, recalling this by the Holy Spirit, helping you to believe what I'm saying to you, help you believe it, help you hear his forgiveness, his grace, his reassurance. And that is going to produce fruit in you of wanting something that is coming out of being loved, coming out of being given grace. And it will look different than going into something with secrecy and shame. Your new desire is going to look very different.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had one other, we're sort of getting long on time here, but the fruit of that forgiveness, it will usually involve telling somebody about this. If you have become aware of a pattern in your life that is causing shame or secrecy, or if somebody I love found out about this, they would be hurt, and it's actually, creating even worse patterns in my life. Like, I'm getting more hooked on this behavior. So the fruit of being forgiven and loved, first, the miracle that you become aware of it shows that God is loving you, and he's saying, now's the time. I'm going to help you through this. So you become aware of it, and he exposes it. But there's that other word of forgiveness right there in grace. And you are going to have a new desire. And it's usually going to be about telling somebody about this that can bring that can remind you of the forgiveness and grace of Jesus. And also that you trust and listen to you for the new desires that you will have, so if that is, what do you want to do instead of doing what you've been doing? What do you want to do differently? And you'll probably know already.
Yeah.
It just helped me. And depending on what it is, you will tell your spouse if you're married while you're listening to this, but maybe depending on what it is, it might be after you've talked to the trusted friend and have kind of a plan
good
of how to
plan.
support
Mhm.
you. If it is more adultery in nature, then you're going to want to have some real support and a plan in place before you talk to your spouse. But, in my case with the drop off, I did tell Sean because I became aware of that. But I also have a group of girls and we confess our sins to each other because when you share your weaknesses with each other in Jesus' family, you get better, actually. And it's, always listening for that new desire too. Well, what do I want to do in place of what I was doing that's going to actually bring life for me? And so then, I kind of was more aware and I could be a little more intentional about what I needed going into that drop off time. And it really changed it for me. And actually, I now treasure that feeling of emptiness after, kind of saying goodbye to the kids. And it's sort of a time of really enjoying creation and the sky. And, I can pray and I sort of feel wow, this is a big day ahead. And there's slight uncomfortable, ness as I face the day ahead. And as I've said goodbye to all the intensity it takes to drop somebody off. And that feeling of kind of emptiness and waiting, I just look up at the sky and it's become like a very treasured moment for me now. So,
yeah, it's good. And the truth of the matter is when these things are brought up, the Lord brings them up, not to shame you, but to fill them, to bring healing, to actually meet the need, And so like when he's exposing the counterfeit thing or the tempting thing and the need that you're desperately trying to fill, he's not going to leave you hanging there. He brings it up so that you can actually experience him meeting it in a legitimate way. And so often the temptation and the things, the empty promises that are out there are just that. It's just going to prove empty and fleeting, and it's actually not going to really give you the thing you really want, which is a deep, abiding sense of connection and security. And so, as Kate said, I've got a group of guys that I talk with as well. She and I obviously check in all the time and connect, but you need support. You need extra support, and you need people that are with you in it, and people that understand the struggle and that love you, and so that you actually do have the real thing, which is really truly being known and being loved. And so thankfully the Lord gives us that in spades in his word and through each other. So we want you to hear that word today, that you are loved and you are valued and that Jesus Christ is for you. And whatever he's bringing up in your life today, it's because he actually has the true thing for you, and he's going to give it to you. And so we are grateful for you guys listening. And as always, you can find in the show notes a link to dandelionministries.org, our website. You can check that out. We have a link for you to be able to support the show in there. And also, if you want to send us questions and or prayer needs, we would love to get those from you. We have my emails in there for you. And we are just grateful for you guys listening.
Thank you so much for your time. Have a great day.